All right, anyway, I'm Hugh Barrett, Chief Product Officer for Exacta Solutions at Telos, and we have Evelyn Anderson, IBM Distinguished Engineer. Big title, guys. We're going to talk about the true cost of compliance and, whether you pay for it now or pay for it later. Go ahead.
Okay, so first thing we're going to talk about is how are you approaching compliance? One of the things that we look at is when we start looking at a lot of the organizations, they have been struggling and have concerns around how they're going to address their data, how they're going to address privacy, and a lot of their cybersecurity controls. And so we know with the influx of ransomware and what's going on in the market when it comes to cybersecurity threats, this is a big concern for many organizations. And so what we started looking at is with all of those new threats that are coming in, one thing that we saw is that, and this is very loud to me, I'm sorry. One thing that we saw is that regulations have actually increased since 2011 by 45%. And so, of course, you can understand how organizations are struggling and they have many challenges around the cybersecurity risk and compliance as a whole. And so what we're here for is to tell you how both Telos and IBM as launch partners can help those organizations address their challenges when it comes to risk management. And so when we started thinking about this and how we'll actually look at it, what we're going to talk to you about today is the cost of compliance, the challenges that organizations are experiencing with risk and compliance, and the solution that Telos and IBM will be utilizing as a part, the solution that we'll use as a part of the launch partnership. Next slide. One of the things, as Hugh just mentioned, where you can pay now or pay later, what we've observed is organizations that actually invest in compliance versus organizations that are not investing in compliance are almost paying 3 times more. As you can see by the numbers that are reflected, when an organization is actually investing in compliance, they're spending on average around $5.4 million. Whereas organizations that are choosing not to invest in compliance, they're spending $14.8 million a year. And so you can see kind of the differences, and when we start talking about investing in compliance, we're talking about things like regulatory reporting, where organizations that were investing in regulatory reporting, we saw that they were spending on average about $1 million. Whereas when it comes to organizations that were choosing not to invest, since 2008, we've seen that, that the US banks have been actually receive fines in excess of $240 billion. So you can see the differences in the cost. And so on average, it's one of those 50% are choosing to be proactive and 50% are choosing to be reactive. So you can see most companies are spending anywhere from 6 to 10% of their revenue to actually invest in compliance programs. And those that are not investing in compliance programs, when they actually have a non-compliance issue, we're seeing that it's costing them around $4 million. But when you start looking at if they have like a mega data breach, that's actually costing them around $401 million. So you can see the benefits of companies choosing to invest now versus investing later.
Also, one thing I'd like to add for my information assurance folks in the audience is, we talk about risk, impact, likelihood. You remember those buzzwords? The cost of doing compliance is 5.4, right? Mm-hmm. The impact of not doing it is 14.8, right? From our school and where we came from, you definitely want to go and spend the 5.4 versus having to pay the 14 million. So it's a no-brainer. This is an easy thing for a risk executive to absorb and say, yeah, let's do it, and let's do it right and be proactive about it.
Yes.
So, the struggle with that organizations are running into, right? I'm going to go through each of them and kind of give you a couple of examples, but too many global and local compliance requirements. Right now, I've had the pleasure, if you want to call it that, of traveling around the world and helping companies with compliance. And I can tell you, if you think there's a lot of regs here in the United States, once you step out of our borders, it starts to double and triple. So that becomes a big issue when you have to really try to adhere to all of these. Now, increasingly complex hybrid environment or enterprises. Once upon a time, it was the IBM mainframe, then came the PC, then came the big data centers, now you have the cloud, right? And not only do you have the cloud, you want to put your stuff in Amazon's cloud, you want to put it in Microsoft's cloud, you want to put it in Google's cloud. And now, the cybersecurity team in your offices, they're overwhelmed, right? They have to start monitoring and doing compliance across all of these different platforms, and it's becoming a big challenge, right? And as most of you know, there's not a lot of cybersecurity people to go around, and this is worldwide. So there has to be a better solution. So we talk about tool sprawl, right? No single source of truth. Too many disparate programs and tools. I don't know how many of you are, spreadsheets is probably one of the biggest tools used in compliance, probably the worst tool to use in compliance. But it's there. There's SharePoint, you name it, someone is using it to help them manage their compliance. And there's just too many of them. And when you have all of these tools, then you have a lot of disparate evidence. Bodies of evidence are all over the place. Artifacts are missing, so on and so forth. And then the next one, too many controls to test and report on, as well as audit fatigue. Anyone knows what audit fatigue is? Anyone experiencing audit fatigue? If you have to adhere to HIPAA, PCI, NIST, CSF, and you happen to be an international company, you have to do the GDPR, and depending on where in the world there's another 4 or 5 regs, you now have to start doing your compliance for your organization, but then you have to report it out to all of these different bodies that are looking for it. And it becomes a challenge. And again, there's not enough of us to go around to handle the amount of regs and the workload that's coming out every year. So, every time there's a bigger and bigger breach, there's another set of policies, directives, you name it. They're just coming at us really, really fast. And then visibility to assure leadership risks are being mitigated, right? Not only do you have to report on all these things and handle and struggle with all of this, now you have to let leadership know what's going on, right? So there's no rest for the weary.
Yeah. And so how we're hoping that we will be able to address your company's challenges is by deploying a cybersecurity risk compliance solution called Active Governance Services. And so this is where Telos and IBM are partnering so that we can actually deploy this solution that will provide a proactive governance services so that every level of your organization understands what's going on. So from your CISOs all the way down through your regulators, auditors, your risk officers, that everyone understands what's actually taking place in your environment. We also want to make sure that we're driving risk reduction. That's the primary goal of every organization, that you're reducing your risk. And so we will be working with those organizations where we'll provide consulting, advisory support, so that we can make sure that not only are you reducing your risk, but we'll have periodic cadences with you to make sure that you understand the impacts that those potential risks may have within your organization. And we're making sure that we actually provide an assurance program so that your security and compliance programs that you actually implement, that they're really protecting your critical data. And then we also, finally, most and foremost, we want to automate. So those spreadsheets that Hugh talked about, we want to do away with those spreadsheets and make sure that we're actually introducing automation into your environment.
There you go.
Oh, it's still me. And so one of the things, when we look at the organizations and the complex landscapes, that we have, as he mentioned, a lot of the regulations. We have, your penetration testing. We have your policies, your audit, your compliance reporting, your security, vulnerability scans that you're performing, your mobile devices, data privacy, security operations, awareness, training, IAM, cloud, and so on. So when you look at all of these different sources, you're getting output and reporting from all of those different sources. And unfortunately, some of the data may be structured, some of it may be unstructured. So you can imagine the folks that are trying to navigate through this to understand what are your actual risks within your environment, where do you actually have deviations, where do you have issues that you're trying to make sure that you're addressing. And then taking into consideration, the different regulations, whether it's your industry, your government, or your local policies that you have to make sure that you're complying with to navigate through this and understand whether or not your actual true risk posture. This is where a lot of companies have big challenges. And so what we're looking at is that we want to make sure that with not only the technology, but also from a consulting perspective, that we're providing you with the expertise that will be able to help you to contextualize the data, to be able to assess it, and help you to understand what your true risk impact may be for the various regulations that you have to comply with.
So let's talk about why AGS, right? So risk reduction, gain end-to-end visibility and vulnerabilities. These are the services that you will get when you've engaged the AGS folks. And I mean, it's a world-class service. And like I said, the bigger the organization, the number of people that you need to help support from a cyber perspective, risk management perspective, the number is growing. And like I remember I said, there's not a lot of us out there in the marketplace right now. Company A steals the cyber folks from company B and so on and so forth. It's a dog-eat-dog world from a cyber perspective. So, with the services, you'll gain some efficient compliances. What they'll do is eliminate a lot of the manual effort and try to bring some automation to the technique. Data integration, be able to integrate data and pull data from a lot of disparate sources to bring it in and keep it in one central place so it can be aggregated, reviewed, and accessed when needed. Ongoing compliance and control monitoring. Continuous monitoring, for those of you who are RMF folks, there's the continuous monitoring step, but continuous monitoring is just a part of risk assessment, regardless of framework. And, continuous monitoring from an asset data to be able to move things from cloud to data centers, all of that is going to be part of the service. And optimize operations, right? Clearly, this is something that has to be done. Right now, I'm not a practitioner anymore, but the more you can optimize, the quicker you can get through things and the better informed you are. And then improve efficiencies, right? Gain efficiencies with pre-built workflows, right? There are tools out there that will allow you to build workflows and kind of help manage the process, right? And I like to say just manage the madness, because it's really madness when you look at the amount of work that's involved in risk assessment and the very few amount of people that's doing it. So services like AGS are going to be very critical, especially as you get into the larger and larger organizations where they have a lot more exposure and the threat landscape is just ripe to come in and attack them. So with Xacta, and the AGS services, right? So we talked about the AGS services. I said it's world-class service. Now you're going to marry that up with a technology that'll help them realize what it is we're all talking about here. So, reduce system compliance time by 90%, up to 90% faster. I'm going to go through all these numbers, and you may giggle, but I'll explain these numbers to you, right? Reduce the time to generate regulatory documents by up to 70%. Reduce the time to research new vulnerabilities by up to 90%, and alleviate audit fatigue, right? Now, would anyone like to have that at their fingertips to be able to help you manage and support risk in your organization, right? I see heads being nodded here. So, with the services that you're going to get with AGS married with the technology and the automation you're going to get with Xacta, you're going to start to understand how you can realize that, right? So, with the Xacta tool, we have workflow, world-class workflow. We call it intelligent workflow because it's very intelligent. It can make decisions based on data that you're entering. Publishing of documents. Remember we talked about you have to report this up the hierarchy in the organization as you have risks and need to report risks. We have the ability to publish your data for you very rapidly. Continuous monitoring. We know how to monitor and select your critical controls and make sure that those controls stay within a tolerable reference range. Remediation planning will help with the remediation planning. Asset vulnerability management. I don't know how many of you are part of your VAT team that run and analyze vulnerabilities, but with the capability that AGS brings to the table, you'll be able to analyze a vulnerability and cascade that analytics across multiple assets so that you're not looking at these vulnerabilities on a repetitious cycle, all the time. Control implementation, control inheritance, which is a key factor in managing risks. You need to inherit controls at the organization or tier 1 level. You need to manage controls at the tier 2 level or the business level. And you need to have controls available for you at the tier 3 or tactical level. Control validation. We'll automate the test, automate the results so that you don't have to do a lot of the work. Control selection. You tell us about your environment, we tell you what controls you need to use, right? And believe it or not, depending on where you are and what regulatory body you need to report to, we will select those multiple controls across multiple different standards and frameworks for you so that you only have to test once and comply many. And then control mapping, right? You tell us that your NIST AC1 control is what you have to meet. We will tell you, well, guess what? On the 800-171, you need to also meet 1.1.2. We can tell you what you need to meet in ISO. We can tell you what you need to meet in CSF. Right, so if you take that AGS service along with the tool that they're going to use, and now you begin to see how they can come in and really help your organization shape and manage risk assessment and get you through this very, very arduous process and continuous process pretty quickly. So they'll leave you with something that's really worthwhile and something that you can then repeat each time you have to go through this assessment. And trust me, you need to go through this on a continuous basis. So it's going to be a very helpful thing. This is a very powerful offering. And I'm not saying that because Exact is a part of it. I'm saying that as a practitioner who've had to do this in the past.
Yes. And so when you look at this, what we're actually giving you with Active Governance Services with Telos is a package. So we've packaged the offering between small, medium, and large. So based on your organization, the number of regulations that you have to comply with, regulations, standards, as well as the number of devices that you need to manage them against, this is how we actually do it. We break out the program where the very first thing that we do with the organization is we have a design workshop. So we actually use the design, excuse me, the design thinking methodology, the enterprise design thinking methodology, where we go through and we understand your organization. First and foremost, what are your goals? What technologies do you already have in place? What are your practices, your processes on how you're actually getting that telemetry data into whatever technology you may have, or if you're managing it via spreadsheets? We want to understand all of these things, and then the biggest thing is we pull in the different actors from your organization. So your risk owner, your risk analysts, your audit folks, regulators. We want to get a perspective from each person to understand what are your pain points. We understand your pains as well as your gains. What do you think, how we can actually work with you? And then we go through a co-creation session. During the co-creation session, we actually work with you to make sure that whenever we deploy the technology, that we're actually doing something that will enhance your environment and enhance your experience around your compliance and risk. And so then, that process usually takes about a week. We give you a full report at the end of it to roll up, it's the one thing that we love about the design thinking session is it's, anonymous. So we don't tag a person's name saying, Tom said this process was crap, and, Mike said it was wonderful as the risk owner, because we want everyone to feel comfortable about really helping us to understand how we can help you. And so that process actually takes about a week, where we go through, we give you a full, readout of exactly what happened during the session. Then we actually go through the design solution. When we go through the design solution, this is where we're helping you to map out everything that we created during the co-creation session to understand how we can improve your environment. And so we map out the plan on how we're going to introduce automation into your environment utilizing the Xacta product, as he has already kind of, stepped you through some of the things. From there, we go through a build and configure. From the build and configure, this is, this may take anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, so we make sure that we have all of your regulations, your standards that you have to comply with, that we make sure that we get those in, do the crosswalk so you can understand the differences between, one reg versus another and your current compliance state. And then we're going to a steady state. And one of the things with the steady state that we offer is that we make sure that we provide you with a consultant that is going to have periodic cadences to make sure that, you understand all of the risk in your environment, number one. And number two, you're getting a true enterprise view from a reporting perspective to understand how you're actually performing as an organization. And then we give them an opportunity so that they can, as I mentioned before, contextualize that so that you understand, on one area, the risk may be higher than it may be in another area. And then we provide advisory on how to quickly and how to mitigate those concerns. So this is, the full program that we have, and we have 5 minutes left, so we wanted to open it up for questions. Don't be shy. He'll answer all of them.
Of course I will. If I don't know an answer, I'll make one up.
No takers, huh? Do you want us to start asking you guys questions? They did ask me to ask the interns back in the back a few questions, so I can start there.
All right.
Okay, well, if not, thank you. Hugh and I will be around for a little while. If you were shy and want to come in and talk to us after the session, we're more than happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.